The biting chill of Halloween night seeped into my bones as I patrolled the winding pathways of Oakwood Cemetery. It was an eerie stillness that hung in the air, the kind that only the dead could conjure. As the groundskeeper, the graveyard was my domain, each headstone a familiar face in the moonlight. Tonight, however, something felt off. A fresh patch of earth near the willow tree drew my attention. Moonlight glinted off the newly placed headstone. But how? I had closed the cemetery hours ago. Curious, I approached, the cold earth squishing beneath my boots. My breath hitched in my throat as I read the inscription, Evelyn, beloved daughter and sister. My name, my date of birth. And today's date as the day of passing. A chill slithered down my spine, far colder than the autumn air. A morbid prank? Perhaps. But the meticulousness of the grave, the freshly turned earth, it all felt too real. Unease prickled at the back of my neck. I spun around, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the tombstones. A glint caught my eye from the far corner of the cemetery. I advanced cautiously, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm in my chest. Another fresh grave. And another. Each headstone bearing the names of people I knew. The local baker, the librarian, the young couple who had just moved in down the street. All living, breathing people. But their names etched in cold stone. Their death dates marked as tomorrow. Panic gnawed at my insides. This was no prank. Something sinister was unfolding in the heart of my graveyard. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the world blurring at the edges. I stumbled back, my hand groping for a headstone for support. That's when I saw it. A dark figure, shrouded in shadow, standing amidst the freshly dug graves. It was tall and slender, its form rippling unnaturally in the breeze. A bone-deep terror seized me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my voice caught in my throat, my legs frozen in place. The figure turned its head slowly, its face hidden in darkness. But even in the shadows, I could feel its gaze boring into me, cold and predatory. A low, guttural growl echoed through the cemetery, sending a fresh wave of fear coursing through me. I had to get out of there. I had to warn the others. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and bolted, my flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness. The growl intensified, the sound of heavy footsteps pounding behind me. I didn't dare look back. I ran, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the terrifying darkness. I lunged for the gates, my fingers scraping against the cold metal. With a final desperate heave, I pushed them open and stumbled out onto the deserted street. Slamming the gates shut, I leaned against them, gasping for breath. The growling stopped. The footsteps faded. I was safe. For now. But the chilling realization hit me. My name was on a headstone. And tomorrow was the date of my death. The rest of the night was a blur of frantic phone calls and unanswered doors. The baker, the librarian, the young couple, all asleep, oblivious to the macabre fate awaiting them. They dismissed my warnings as a Halloween prank gone too far, their laughter echoing in my ears like a death knell. Dawn painted the sky with streaks of blood red and ominous orange, the cemetery gates casting long, eerie shadows. I had spent the remaining hours huddled in my small apartment, every creak and groan of the old building sending shivers down my spine. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by the haunting image of the shadowy figure and the chilling inscription on my tombstone. As the first rays of sunlight touched the headstones, I knew I couldn't hide any longer. Armed with a shovel and a rusty old hunting knife, I returned to Oakwood Cemetery. The morning dew clung to the grass, each droplet reflecting the somber beauty of the graveyard. But the serenity was a facade. Beneath the surface, a darkness lurked, waiting to claim its victims. I moved cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The fresh graves were a stark reminder of the night's horrors. The names etched in stone, the dates marking their impending demise. A wave of nausea washed over me, the weight of their impending doom pressing down on my shoulders. I reached my own grave, the sight of my name sending a fresh wave of terror through me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. With a determined grunt, I plunged the shovel into the earth, the metal biting into the soft soil. As I dug, a strange feeling crept over me. It was as if the cemetery itself was holding its breath, the air thick with anticipation. The birdsong that usually filled the morning air was absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. Suddenly, the shovel hit something solid. I dropped to my knees, my fingers scraping away the remaining earth. A wooden box emerged, its surface etched with strange symbols. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. This was no ordinary grave. With trembling hands, I pried open the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a collection of objects that made my blood run cold. A lock of hair, a baby tooth, a wedding ring. Each item a stolen piece of a life, a morbid trophy taken before its time. And then I saw it. A photograph. My photograph. The one I had lost years ago, a cherished memory of my childhood. It was tucked neatly beside a handwritten note. The ink faded and smudged. I unfolded the brittle paper, my heart pounding in my chest. The words danced before my eyes, each one a chilling revelation. Evelyn, the keeper of the dead, will join their ranks. Her time has come. The ritual is complete. The note fluttered from my numb fingers, the weight of its implications crashing down on me. I was not merely a victim in this macabre game. I was the final piece, the culmination of a twisted ritual. But what ritual? And who was behind it? Desperation fueled my actions. I dug through the box, searching for any clue, any hint that could lead me to the answers. A tarnished silver locket caught my eye. I opened it, revealing 2 miniature portraits. One was of a young woman with piercing blue eyes, her expression hauntingly familiar. The other was of a man, his face obscured by shadows. A memory flickered, a forgotten fragment from my childhood. The woman in the locket, it was my mother. But who was the man? And why were their portraits buried in my grave? Questions swirled in my mind, each one a dead end. I needed to find someone, anyone, who could help me decipher this puzzle. My thoughts turned to the local historian, Mr. Blackwood. He had spent his life studying the town's history, its secrets buried deep within the dusty pages of his countless books. I raced back to my apartment, the locket clutched tightly in my hand. The historian's house was on the outskirts of town, a rambling Victorian mansion filled with forgotten relics of the past. I hammered on the door, my anxiety mounting with each passing second. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing Mr. Blackwood, his face etched with surprise. "Evelyn, what brings you here at this ungodly hour?" he inquired, his voice raspy with sleep. I stumbled inside, breathlessly recounting the events of the night, the fresh graves, the chilling note, the locket. Mr. Blackwood listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is most peculiar," he murmured, examining the locket. "The woman, she bears a striking resemblance to the infamous Isabel Blackwood, a distant relative of mine who was accused of witchcraft centuries ago." My heart pounded in my chest. "Witchcraft? But what does that have to do with me?" Mr. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Isabel was said to have performed dark rituals, using the stolen belongings of her victims to fuel her power. She was eventually banished from the town, but legend has it that her spirit lingers, seeking revenge on those who wronged her. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "But why me? I've never done anything to harm her." Mr. Blackwood shook his head. "I don't know, Evelyn, but I fear you are in grave danger. Isabel's rituals were said to culminate on All Hallows' Eve, the veil between the living and the dead at its thinnest. And tonight—" His words hung in the air, heavy with dread. Tonight was Halloween. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place, the chilling truth dawning on me. I was the final sacrifice, the key to Isabel's resurrection. And time was running out. Fear coiled in my gut, a cold serpent tightening its grip with each passing second. The clock was ticking, the hours slipping away like sand through my fingers. I had to find a way to break the curse, to stop Isabel before she could claim my life and unleash her wrath upon the town. "There must be something we can do," I pleaded, my voice thick with desperation. "A way to stop her, to break the ritual." Mr. Blackwood's face was grim, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "The only way to appease Isabel is to return what was stolen," he said softly. "To undo the wrongs of the past. But how?" The victims were long gone, their belongings buried with them. A sense of hopelessness washed over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. Suddenly, a thought sparked, a glimmer of hope in the encroaching darkness. The cemetery! The fresh graves, the stolen belongings, perhaps they held the key to my salvation. Without another word, I bolted from Mr. Blackwood's house, my mind racing. The cemetery was my only chance, the battleground where my fate would be decided. As I ran, a strange energy crackled in the air, the wind whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. The once familiar streets seemed twisted and unfamiliar, the shadows lengthening and contorting into grotesque shapes. The veil between the living and the dead was thinning, the boundary blurring with each step I took. I burst through the cemetery gates, my lungs burning, my heart pounding like a drum. The air hung heavy with an otherworldly presence, the headstones seeming to lean in closer, their silent whispers echoing in my ears. I raced to the fresh graves, my hands tearing at the earth, desperation fueling my every move. One by one, I unearthed the stolen belongings, each item a piece of a shattered life. A child's toy, a love letter, a worn pair of boots. Tears stung my eyes as I placed them back into the graves, murmuring apologies for the desecration. With each returned item, a sense of peace settled over the cemetery, the oppressive energy dissipating like morning mist. The wind died down, the shadows retreating back into their corners. But one grave remained, the one bearing my name. I approached it with trepidation, my hand hovering over the freshly turned earth. The inscription mocked me, a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited me, but I wouldn't give up. Not yet. With a deep breath, I began to dig, the shovel cutting through the earth with a sickening finality. The wooden box emerged once more, its sinister symbols seeming to pulse with a dark energy. I opened the lid, my gaze falling upon the collection of stolen memories. And then I saw it. My photograph. The last piece of the puzzle. With trembling hands, I lifted it from the box, the image of my younger self staring back at me. A wave of sadness washed over me, a longing for the innocence that had been stolen from me. And then, with a surge of defiance, I tore the photograph in half, the sound echoing through the silent graveyard. A gasp escaped my lips as the photograph ripped, a cold wind whipping through the cemetery. The headstones rattled, the trees groaned, and the very earth seemed to tremble beneath my feet. A sense of dread washed over me, far more potent than anything I had felt before. From the depths of the freshly dug grave, a dark mist began to rise, swirling and twisting into a grotesque parody of a human form. It towered over me, its presence suffocating, its power undeniable. Isabel had arrived. Her form solidified, revealing a woman of ethereal beauty, her eyes burning with an unholy fire. She smiled, a cruel, triumphant grin that sent shivers down my spine. "Evelyn," she purred, her voice a seductive whisper that slithered into my ears. "You cannot escape your fate. The ritual is complete. You are mine." I stumbled back, my voice caught in my throat. The shovel and knife felt woefully inadequate against the raw power emanating from Isabel. But I wouldn't surrender without a fight. "I will not be your sacrifice," I choked out, my voice trembling. "I will not let you harm this town." Isabel's laughter echoed through the graveyard, a chilling sound that pierced the silence. "You are a fool, Evelyn," she sneered. "Your defiance is futile. You belong to me, just as your mother did before you." My mother? The revelation struck me like a lightning bolt. The locket, the resemblance, it all made sense now. My mother had been Isabel's victim, her life stolen, her spirit trapped. And now, Isabel sought to claim me as well, to bind me to her for eternity. Rage ignited within me, a burning fury that eclipsed my fear. I lunged at Isabel, the knife raised high. But she was too quick, too powerful. With a flick of her wrist, I was thrown back, the wind knocked out of me. I lay on the cold ground, gasping for breath, my body aching. Isabel advanced, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "It's time, Evelyn," she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. "Embrace your destiny." She reached for me, her touch sending a wave of icy coldness through my veins. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. But then, a voice echoed through the cemetery, a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Leave her alone!" I opened my eyes, my heart leaping into my throat. Standing between me and Isabel was a figure I had long thought lost to the passage of time. My mother. Disbelief mingled with a surge of overwhelming joy as I gazed upon my mother's spectral form. She stood defiantly, her eyes blazing with a love that transcended death itself. "You will not have her," my mother's voice rang out, firm and resolute. "Her life is her own, not yours to take." Isabel recoiled, her expression contorted in a mask of fury. "You dare defy me?" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "You, who betrayed me, who abandoned me to this fate." My mother's form wavered, a flicker of pain crossing her translucent features. "I did what I had to do," she whispered, her voice heavy with regret. "To protect her, my Evelyn." Isabel let out a guttural scream, her anger erupting like a volcano. She lashed out at my mother, her spectral hands tearing at the air. But my mother stood her ground, her love for me a shield against Isabel's wrath. The cemetery became a battleground of unseen forces, the air crackling with energy, the ground trembling beneath our feet. The headstones shook, the trees thrashed, and the wind howled in protest. I watched in awe as my mother fought back, her love fueling her strength. She parried Isabel's attacks, her movements graceful and precise. It was a dance of life and death, a struggle for my very soul. And then, in a blinding flash of light, Isabel's form began to disintegrate, her screams echoing through the graveyard. The stolen belongings in the open graves started to glow, each item radiating a warmth that seemed to banish the darkness. As Isabel's power waned, my mother turned to me, her eyes filled with a love that pierced my very being. "My darling Evelyn," she whispered, her voice soft and gentle. "You are safe now. Be brave, be strong, and live your life to the fullest." With those final words, her form shimmered and faded, disappearing into the morning light. A profound sadness washed over me, but it was tempered by a sense of gratitude. My mother had sacrificed herself to save me, her love transcending the boundaries of life and death. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm glow over the cemetery, a sense of peace settled over me. The fresh graves were gone, replaced by the familiar headstones of those who had passed long ago. The nightmare was over. In the days that followed, the town returned to its normal rhythm, the events of Halloween night fading into a collective memory. But for me, the experience left an indelible mark. I carried the memory of my mother's love with me, a beacon of light in the darkest of times. I continued my work as the cemetery keeper, tending to the graves with a newfound reverence. And every Halloween, I would return to the spot where my mother had saved me, leaving a single white rose as a tribute to her sacrifice. The cemetery was no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary of remembrance. And as I walked among the headstones, I knew that I was not alone. My mother's spirit was with me, watching over me, her love an eternal flame that would forever burn bright in my heart.